Hello, everybody. Welcome to the lineup. If you haven't been here before, my name is Lily Dute. I'm on the publicity team over here at Soho Press. We have a really wonderful preview event for you today. So thank you so much for joining, both folks who have come before and folks who are new to the series. A few housekeeping things before I introduce you to the folks who are talking today. This is an event that we co-partner with Mystery to Me Books for in Madison, Wisconsin. We couldn't be doing these events without Mystery to Me Books. So if you are so entranced by Karen's book after the event today, you can place a pre-order by clicking this little green button here at the bottom of your screen. All of those sales really help Mystery to Me continue to be able to provide us this platform and keep up the magic that they wield in Madison, Wisconsin. We have a 40th birthday party lineup event next month in June, on June 30th, to celebrate Soho turning 40 years old. You can tune in on June 30th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and we'll have a link available for that next week, which will be very exciting. So keep that on your radar. And then, as always, we're giving away 3 gift cards at the end of this event. So just by being here in person, virtually, we have entered you to win these gift cards, so make sure you're staying until the end of the event to find out if you've won. We'll also do a little Q&A at the end, so if you have any questions for Karen or Susan at any point during this event, you can plop them into the chat, or there's a little white Q&A button on the right side of your screen. You can put them in there, and we'll make sure to get to as many as we can. Finally, without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Susan Elia MacNeal, who is the New York Times bestselling author of the Maggie Hope series and Mother-Daughter Traitor Spy. MacNeal won the Barry Award and an Audiophile Earphones Award and has been nominated for the Edgar, Macavity, Agatha, Left Coast Crime, Dillis, ITW Thriller, and Nero Awards. She lives in Brooklyn, New York with her husband and son. Susan, thank you so much for joining this conversation.
Hello. I'm delighted. Thank you to Mystery Me and Soho. Thank you.
Yes, and the reason for the season is Karen Odden, whose book we are celebrating today. Karen Odden received her PhD in English from New York University and taught Victorian literature at UW-Milwaukee. She's the author of 5 crime novels set in 1870s London, including her award-winning USA Today bestselling debut, A Lady in the Smoke. Her work has been nominated for the Lefty, Anthony, Agatha, and Derringer Awards, and appeared in Best Mystery Stories of the Year. A transplant from New York, Karen lives in Arizona with her family, and you can find her online at KarenOdden.com. And her book, An Artful Dodge, which is coming out from Soho Crime, is out next week. So congratulations, Karen. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to pass the conversation to you guys, and I'll be back in a while.
Thank you, Lily. And Karen, it's so nice to talk to you. I'm so excited.
I know. It's so nice doing this with a friend.
Yeah, we're friends, actually. We're like novelist friends, but we're friends too. So but this is really fun because I love your books and I'm such a fan. And it's such a privilege to be able to talk about your books at length. So one of the things I wanted to ask you was, we know each other as historical fiction novelists, but you actually come by this legitimately, meaning you have a PhD in Victorian literature and you have taught Victorian literature, which to me seems so fancy. But so can you tell us a little bit about your interest in Victorian literature and your start? And your
I can. Although it's hilarious that you say I come by it legitimately, as if you're somehow illegitimate. Just so ridiculous.
I never took any classes though. I don't have a degree. I don't have something on my wall.
Oh, well, I don't know if that really makes any difference. But okay, so before we actually started this, I actually went downstairs and said to my husband, what year did I start grad school? Because it was the same year he graduated from Columbia. We were both in New York. I was working at Christie's to pay the bills. And while he was going to school for his master's, and then he went and got a job so that I could go back and get my PhD at NYU. And I was trying to remember what year it was. It's kind of murky back there. Anyway, but it was 95. And so what that means is that I have been reading and studying and writing and teaching about the Victorian period for 31 years, which is just incredible. Insane. How can I possibly be, I don't like to think of myself as old enough to have done anything for 31 years, but I am. So So I had done my master's actually at Michigan, and then took a hiatus because I was very, very young when I was trying to do my master's, and I realized I wasn't quite ready for grad school yet. And so I went back to NYU, and my very first semester there, I took a class on the Victorian novel. It was called The Dead Mother, and the professor was interested in why there were all these orphans running around Victorian novels. And she kind of read it as a trope for a transition that happened from the 18th to the 19th century. The 18th century, your social class, your social identity was completely defined by your parents. Whereas in the 19th century, with the rise of, industry and newspapers and railways and shipping companies, and I mean, all of this stuff and the changes that were happening socially, you could pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Your identity, your social identity didn't hang on what your parents did or where you grew up. You could define yourself. And so this orphan was sort of a trope to kind of register that. And I remember sitting in her class and thinking, this is a really interesting way to think about literature as yet another way to think about how history kind of gets tracked into fiction, right? So anyway, and I was lucky that the Victorian period, we had 4 people on the bench who were all Victorians at NYU. So we had a novelist, somebody who did poetry, someone who did science and technology, and someone who focused on questions of British Empire. So I had lots of classes, a really nice deep grounding for when I went to work on my dissertation. And then I wrote my dissertation. Oh, Susan, you clicked off for me. Are you back? Oh, Susan might be having technical difficulties. Sorry about that. Anyway, so when I went to write my dissertation, I decided I wanted to write it on Victorian railway disasters, which sounds weird. But I was interested in finding out the origins for PTSD. And they actually, that language of trauma that we use, a lot of people think it kind of begins with shell shock in World War I. Or they'll trace it back to Freud and his work with hysterics in the 1890s. And I actually trace it back to the 1860s with railway crashes and all the medical treatises that were written about them. Because I was interested in finding out sort of where the origins of that began. And so I wrote that. And then when I decided to write fiction somewhere in like around 2006 or 7, I was staying at home with my kids. I had 2 kids. They were little. I didn't get a whole lot of time to write. But I wrote a book, my very first book, A Lady in the Smoke, that is about a young woman who was in a railway crash with her mother in 1874. So that was sort of the transition to fiction. But I plundered my dissertation completely for that book.
I love it.
So
we were actually, we were in New York at the same time. When you were in the mid 90s, I was too. I was working for Random House. Actually, I was an intern, and then I was a little editorial assistant. So I was doing my own thing. I'm sure we like crossed paths on Fifth Avenue or something at some point. Central Park.
We probably did. Yeah. That's so funny.
Speaking of historical things, you found one of the most interesting historical tidbits I've heard of in a long time, and that is the 40 elephants, and that was the inspiration for the book. And I would love for you to share, like, first of all, how did you find about the 40 elephants? Like, where were you?
Oh, well, this is kind of a fun story. So my daughter Julia was over in England. This is in 2021. She was doing a semester at Oxford, and then I said, well, I will come after you're all finished, and I can, stay with you for, we can maybe have like 10 days, 12 days or something in London together. And, I was trying to convince her that I would be helping her, with the language problem, the language barrier. And she's just like, giving me eye roll. Anyway, she thought actually it was kind of a funny joke. She chuckled and she's like, oh, Mom. Anyway, so we rented a little place in Notting Hill and ran around and did, book things and tea things and museum things like we do. And one night it was a very typical December London night. It was storming, it was raining, it was incredibly windy. Our umbrellas had turned inside out like 4 times, and we kind of dodged into the Great Scotland Yard Hotel, which had sort of been on my bucket list of things to go visit. It's actually it's a relatively new hotel. I think it was built in like, I don't know, 1990 or 2000 or something like that. And it was actually built on the Great Scotland Yard, which was this in the Victorian period, was a great big cobbled yard that the horses and carriages could come in. And it was kind of, everybody used that entrance instead of the one off 4 Whitehall Place, which was the official address of Scotland Yard. Anyway, so Marriott built this hotel, and it's Victorian themed. And we walked in, and the lobby is all full of glass cases with crime memorabilia. Police whistles and truncheons and mugshots. And there was this pair of boots that somebody had worn to run away from the police and gotten muddy or something. So they were in there. I mean, they had all kinds of really great stuff. And of course, I'm taking pictures of it and doing my usual nerdy thing. And then we wanted to go to the restaurant. And they said, I'm very sorry, we don't have anything until like 10 o'clock at night. And they said, but you can go over to the bar. It's right over there. It's called the 40 Elephants. And so we went in, and because of the Victorian theme, I assumed that the 40 elephants would refer to Britain's imperial project in India or Africa, where the real elephants live. And it wasn't. It's there was actually a little QR code on the table, and my guess is that the waiters and waitresses just got sick of people asking, why is it called the 40 elephants? And it had, for more information about 40 elephants, click here. And so I did. And that was when I found out that the 40 Elephants was actually an all-women thieving gang that really came into being in the 1870s with the rise of the department stores in London's West End. And there is a male gang that was working out of Elephant and Castle, which is south of the Thames. And they were violent, and they were burglars and all kinds of other things. But they didn't let the women sort of in on their activities. And so the women decided, okay, well, we're going to go off and do our own thing. And that was sort of where it began. I mean, it really was one of those, wait, what kind of moments for me. And even Julia looked at me and she says, you're thinking about this as a book, aren't you? And I said, yes. So
absolutely.
And the idea sort of sat fallow for a couple of years because I was writing other stuff and published Under Veiled Moon and whatever. But then in 2024, I pitched the idea to Juliet at Left Coast Crime, and she said, yeah, I want to read that book. Go ahead and write it. So
absolutely. And it's just such an amazing idea. You reference Charles Dickens, An Old Curiosity Shop, in the text of the novel. And Mariah Fredericks, who's another friend of ours, but also another historical mystery writer, of course, said basically that this was like a girl gang version of Oliver. I'm paraphrasing. She said it more elegantly. But it's like if Oliver were like done with women. And I wanted to ask you about that, given your PhD in Victorian literature.
Oh yeah, I mean, Fagin is definitely sort of in there, and the whole idea of the boy pickpockets and stuff. For my second book, actually, A Dangerous Duet, I had a boy thieving gang working out of the bottom of a music hall, because music halls were empty during the day; they were only busy at night, so the kids could sleep during the day and then go out at night thieving. And that was something that the music halls were used for. But so I had already written a sort of boy thieving gang. And of course, Inspector Corvin from the last 2 books, he was a former thief in Whitechapel. So I guess thieves have been, now that you mention it, thieves have been actually kind of running through for a while. I guess I'm really interested in thieving. So, but I wanted to make it about, I was really interested in writing something about women. And I think, I don't know whether you find this, but oftentimes a book idea comes from 2 places. One of them is sort of the external piece, like the 40 elephants that I find. And I think, wow, that's an idea big enough to carry a book. And then the other part is me trying to work out something that's going on in my personal life. And not to be all TMI about it, but what had happened was I had a very, very good girlfriend. I mean, somebody who I was really close to. And I guess a few years before I started writing this book, she had, basically ghosted me. And I'd never had that happen before. Like I've never had
Mm.
somebody vanish. I mean, obviously fringe people, yes. I mean, like people who you're kind of just like acquaintances, but somebody dear to my heart. And she just left. And it made me, well, first of all, I was really sad for about a year, but it made me think about, okay, what is loyalty? And how is it different between friends, between sisters, between thieves, people who have a common interest? Is it length of time spent? Is it the fact that you're watching out for them and trying to protect them? Is it, at one point, Kit Jemison, my heroine, she says of her friend Mary that she would play every last card she had to make sure that I got away safely. Is that what it is? So, and I think it depends. I mean, if you're living in a dangerous world, loyalty looks different, right? So
Yeah.
I think I was just really interested in looking at loyalty in women. So that's kind of how, so the idea of a girl gang kind of just worked.
Well, I just loved it. And I was able to read an early copy. And one of the things I did was I wrote a blurb and I used the word pickpocket. And you very kindly said, no, it's an dodge. And could you just explain the difference? Because I find this fascinating. What's the difference between a pickpocket and a dodge or a dodger?
A dodger, so, well, I think that in Dickens, the Artful Dodger was a thief and a pickpocket, but a dodge generally is almost like a skit. It's it's like it's a small con in a way, and so whereas a pickpocket thing that doesn't require a whole lot of planning. That's literally just a walk by grab, and handkerchiefs and watches and coins. I mean, they were all valuable, in Victorian England, but the dodge is it's more intricate. And one of the things I found really interesting was that the thieves practiced their dodges. So, for example, in the very beginning of the book, we have Kit and Mary going to a department store, and there's a plan. There's a sequence. So Mary goes in first, and then Kit waits a few minutes because she doesn't want anyone thinking they've come in together. Then she comes in. Mary goes to one side of the room. Kit goes to the other side of the room. She's looking at the gloves, right? And she, with the department stores, they had cases, so you had to ask the clerk to take them out. And so she's saying, can you take out that one and that one? And what about that silk ribbon and that and that? And then Sid, Mary's young nephew, he comes in, grabs Mary's purse, and runs off with it. And Mary shrieks and throws up her arms and goes into this faint. And of course, everyone's, running for smelling salts, and one person is sent to chase the thief, and the whole bit. And meanwhile, of course, Mary, Kit is sitting there filling her thieving pockets with all this stuff. So, but they would practice those things so that they got the timing down, and they were kind of stealthy about it. But a dodge is what we would call now like a small con.
So Karen, would you have been a good dodger?
I've been terrible.
I know. I'm not terrible too.
I'm kind of clumsy. My hands aren't very clever. I tried to play piano for a few years, and I was just kind of miserable at it. So I think you have to have a certain mentality, that, a very, you have to have, certainly agile fingers, and also a certain kind of boldness, because, a lot of it is about how you carry yourself off. I mean, that sort of, courageous, I don't know, what is that? It's aplomb, I guess.
Aplomb,
and you just
yeah.
you don't let anyone ruffle you. Yeah, you don't. It is theatrical, and you don't let anybody, ruffle you. And to your point, I mean, it's theatrical, and the woman, Maggie O'Connell, who comes back from the penal colony and wants to take over the ring. This is kind of the big inciting incident of the book, that she's there to cause problems for the ring. She comes back, but her training was theater. She was a magician's assistant on stage, and an actress and a chanteuse. I mean, and, for a couple years there in London, she was sort of, the one that all of the men wanted to come to her dressing room afterwards. So it is theatrical. That's exactly it. Yeah.
Well, Kit is your heroine, but Maggie is definitely a huge presence in the book. I thought she was fascinating, and she's based on a real person. So, can you talk about that?
Well, she is based on kind of a collective, I guess, of people. So in the I think it was in like 1788, Britain decided to start sending criminals to Australia. In the 1600s, they were sending them over to America, but after the war, the Revolutionary War, America's like, yeah, no, we're not we're not taking the criminals anymore. And so they had to find a new place. And they were also interested in getting their foot into Australia, what they called New South Wales at the time, before France did. So they thought, okay, well, we're just going to gather up a bunch of criminals and send them down there, and we're going to plant the British flag. And so between 1788 and 1868, which was the last year that they sent people, it was 162,000 criminals.
Oh my goodness.
About 10 to 12% of them were women. And the way that they would work it for the women is they had a ship, like think about the Hulks and Great Expectations, but they'd have a ship, and they would, a woman would, be convicted of crime, and usually it was thieving. It wasn't things like prostitution was not a transportable crime. Murder was a hangable offense. You weren't getting violent people. You were getting thieves. And so what they would do is they would basically load women onto the ship. And once they hit 100 women, they sent the ship off because they were desperate to get women down there because, of course, it's like 90% men. So they were all exactly. No, yeah. And so they wanted women down there to marry, to have children, to keep their houses. And there was basically a penal area that was specifically for them. It was called the factory, and the women would work down there. So they had two main ones. The first one, the one that most people know, is on Botany Bay on the east side near Sydney. And then the second one, which began kind of in the 1850s to be a penal colony, was Swan River on the west side. And that's the one that I have Maggie come from. But she is caught thieving. And the usual sentence for thieving was 7 years transportation, but she actually gets double. And then she ends up having to stay there for another 6 years because they catch her doing something else wrong. I mean, so she ends up being there for 20 years. And by the time she gets out, she is a hardened, angry, and very determined woman when she comes back to London.
Absolutely. And she's the person Kit has to work with.
Yeah.
Tell me about Kit. How did you come up with her character and her persona?
It's a great question. She kind of sprang in my head.
That's best answer.
I read as much as I could find about the 40 elephants. I mean, I was digging up, pieces. There's a book I have that's about the rise of the detective in Victorian England. And there was a little bit in there about, women thieves. I was reading about women pirates, pickpockets. There was one woman in the Victorian time. She was Russian. And she was gorgeous. There are actually pictures of her. She was, I think, active in the 1860s, 70s. She's gorgeous, but she had a monkey that she had trained to, when she would pick, jewelry, and she would feed it to the monkey would eat it. And that's how she would, I mean, like crazy stuff, right? I mean, and then there was of course, there was a woman, Marm Mandelbaum, who was on the Lower East Side of New York. I don't know if you know about her, but she was responsible for something like $20 million worth. I mean, she was a fence. And when she finally fled, because the police had finally, caught her, she fled to Canada. They opened up her house, and it was like Bluebeard's cave. I mean, rugs, rare books, money, furniture, paintings, pianos, jewelry, everything. And so, you start putting together all these different people, and you start getting a feel for the different thieves. Now, Marm Mandelbaum, I think, was much closer for me to Maggie. Just the things that I read about her. And there is a book out there about Marm Mandelbaum, and it's a good one. But I also found Brian MacDonald wrote a book about, it's called Alice Diamond and the 40 Elephants, or the 40 Thieves. I can't remember which one he uses, but it's kind of focused more on their later career, because in the 1920s, I mean, they were these beautiful flapper girls, right? They, so, and I don't think that Scotland Yard managed to shut them down until after, well, very close to the beginning of World War II. Ostensibly, they were sort of shut down, but Alice Diamond was this amazingly beautiful and daring thief, and she led the gang in the 1920s, and that was when they were called the 40 Elephants. So I had books, I had some stuff, and even just like finding out about this woman who was a pirate, and she was married to this guy, to this captain, and she and the captain stole a ship out of a harbor, and she was a key part of it. Like, she wasn't just kind of sitting there, letting him do all the work. She was a real pirate. And so there's all these kind of fun stories to think about, and even something like Mole Flanders, which was Defoe's book about a woman thief. So there's a lot of them if you kind of start looking for them.
Well, that brings me to another question, which is, what about readers who might say, oh, but in the Victorian era, women were at home and they were cloistered and they were, protected, and they were, all these different things that, sort of come to mind when you think about a Victorian woman. So
Right.
how do you deal with that?
It's a great question. I mean, and you and I have talked about this problem of sort of, historical truth versus verisimilitude, and what people believe to be true about the period. And you don't want to hit the reader disbelief button.
Right.
But in this case, the Victorian women that were often depicted are depicted in television shows, and were often, in fact, depicted by many of the novelists, Trollope, and Wilkie Collins. These were upper class, often unmarried women, and they were kept on a tight leash. They were because their value in the marriage market depended upon them being pure and virginal and innocent, and secluded and protected. And they would be, the idea was that they were going to grow up and be the keeper of the house. So they had to be sort of, the angel in the house, that old, sort of Victorian ideal. But women who were orphans and scullery maids and washerwomen and actresses and prostitutes and dressmakers, nobody's watching these people. Why would they? I mean,
Right.
They're out there. They're just out there earning a living and trying to like get by and earn enough money to feed themselves and their kids. I mean, I know it's a little bit counterintuitive, but many Victorian women had a lot of freedom, because most of the people in London walked everywhere. And that's a non-gendered activity, right? Like, women can walk just as much as men can walk. It's not as if, men are allowed to drive cars and women aren't, or whatever. I mean, so, and as for the trains, I mean, they were a great democratizer. I mean, all the women could ride trains, just the way men can. So, I mean, anyway, I guess what I'm saying is that I really, I know that I get a little bit of pushback sometimes from people who say, wait a minute, how can you have, your heroine running around doing all these things? I said, well, she's an orphan. She's, and Kit is from a part of town, Elephant and Castle, which is very seedy, very crime ridden, full of brothels and gambling halls and fences and pawn shops. And nobody's keeping an eye on her and her virtue. She's looking out for herself and for her sister, Sarah.
Exactly.
So,
well, this brings me to, okay, I looked this up. We were talking about this when we were thinking about what we were going to say, and I looked up the Tiffany problem.
Okay.
So this is the Tiffany problem is a phenomenon in historical and fantasy fiction where an historically accurate fact feels completely fake or anachronistic to modern audiences. Coined by fantasy author Joe Walton, it is named after the name Tiffany, a very common medieval name derived from Theophania, that readers today assume, sorry, I don't have my reading glasses on, is a modern invention. So the Tiffany problem is something that we grapple with. And I was like, we've talked about this in other talks when I've talked about doing research on Winston Churchill, and how I was going through some Churchill papers with annotated notes, and there was an OMG and which was, oh my God. But I could never use that, I felt, because it would just completely destroy the illusion of the book. And I would have like 80 people writing into Goodreads saying, like, oh, why are you making him speak like a Valley girl? You know, that's Winston
Right.
Churchill. He
And
couldn't
yeah, and
possibly say
yeah,
OMG, but they used a
right.
lot of initials were all over those documents. So OMG was actually a Churchillian,
Yeah.
affectation.
Well, I mean, and
So,
you think about it, and I mean, people were writing telegrams. And you
yes.
paid by the word. So,
Hmm.
abbreviations make sense. But yeah, I can just imagine some Goodreads person saying, writing and saying, so what's next? He's going to say LMAO and,
Yeah, exactly.
but that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. Like that sense
Hmm.
of, this is a, you can put in the historically accurate fact, but you're going to destroy the verisimilitude. The readers are going to push the disbelief button. And I ran into that actually with Inspector Corvin in my last
Hmm.
couple books, because he drinks coffee. And
That's right.
I had someone write in saying, I love how accurate your books are. I feel like I'm walking around London in them, but Victorians drink tea. And and it was one of those situations where I was kind of like, do I engage with this? But she had contacted
Yeah.
me through my website. It wasn't like a Goodreads review or anything. And I said, thank you for, for bringing that, for bringing that up. But actually 7 million tons of coffee was still being like brought into the customs house, every year. People were drinking it. It was more expensive. But one of the things I did then in the second book was I kind of framed it. I have Corvin kind of just make that little bit of an allusion to, I know coffee is more expensive than tea, but I can't bear weak, drinks in the morning. It's like I'm tipping my hat to what I know people, many people think about the Victorian period, in order to be able to present a piece of Corvin, because that is sort of part of his character. He doesn't like
It
weak things.
is. Hmm.
So yeah.
He's my book boyfriend, by the way. I don't know if I've ever told you this, but Inspector Corbin is my like book crush. So I know what he drinks in the morning.
Yes, you do.
Um, One of the things that I love about this book is how it has so many relationships between and among women. And I feel like,
Mhm.
that's not always the case when you pick up a book, even a book written by a woman. So did you do that on purpose? Did it just sort of come about with this group of thieves, or how did that happen?
Well, like I said, I was kind of preoccupied by the idea of,
Mhm.
women friendships and loyalty. And,
Mhm.
maybe some of this is because I have a daughter who is now
Yeah.
25, and, the relationship between us has shifted. I mean, I've always felt deeply loyal, to her. I mean, the same way,
Mhm.
you feel about your child, but the relationship has shifted where, it's not so kind of unidirectional. I mean, it feels much more
Mhm.
mutual now. And I would say that our ideas about what it means to be loyal to each other have changed as a result too, and I don't know, when you're writing, do you, sort of have your son in mind? Like, I mean, do some of the things that you're kind of working through or with, or something that's coming up in your family, does it make its way into your
Oh,
books?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Do you have a sister? Because Kit's sister is like so important in this
Yeah.
novel.
I have two.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay.
I
Can you
do.
talk about your sisters?
Yeah. So I have, so I'm the oldest of four. Then
Mhm.
comes Kevin, my brother, he's 2 years younger. And then there's a 5-year gap. And then there's Kristen. And
Mhm.
then there's Jen.
Mhm.
And Kristen is a teacher by profession. Jen's a lawyer. And, we were not, this is another one of these funny things, you watch as things change over time, because, when I was 18 and heading off to college, I mean, Jen was like 8. So the gap was huge. But then, of course, over time, you kind of you get to like your mid 20s, early 30s, whatever it is. And those 8 years difference don't really matter anymore. So, and it goes from being where, I'm sort of the older sister teaching to, me looking to them for support sometimes, and, being puzzled about something and calling them up and saying, what do I do about this? So again, that's a relationship change, as we age. And that was one of the things I did want to capture, because Kit and Sarah, I mean, Kit, their father left early. He left when Kit was 7, and Sarah was barely born. Their mom died, and then Kit, ever since, has been taking care of the two of them. And, she's thieving, but she didn't want Sarah getting into that. So she urged Sarah to go off and do something else. So Sarah's a scullery maid in a house in Mayfair, and she's 14. And Kit, really still conceives of them as being, she's the protector and Sarah's the younger sister. And you see over the course of the book where Sarah's kind of fidgeting against that a little bit. You can tell me things. I'm not a baby, kind of that sort of energy where she wants to be taken as like, look, I'm earning a wage. I deserve a little bit of, okay, I'm not you. I'm not grown up. I don't know everything, but I'm working. I'm earning a wage. I'm bringing it home. Like I'm not just somebody who needs to be protected anymore. And so the flow of information changes because Kit starts thinking to herself, well, I do need to tell her things. I can't keep things from her the way I used to. And that changes the dynamic too. So
I love that. I love that in the book. I love how they grow closer. Yeah. This is an incredibly cinematic book. And you open, with, a Dodge. So, we see it all play out. We sort of see all the characters, and then we kind of come back to watching them rehearse. So we see like where the skills come from and how it's all planned out and how it's all done. And I thought, I love this book and I want to see this television series, this movie, like however it's done. Did you ever think of that when you were writing? Did you think of it in like a cinematic way?
Yeah. I mean, the very first scene, actually the first scene, the way I wrote it originally was with them doing the Dodge. That was going to be the very first scene. And then I gave it to Juliet to edit. And it was kind of like the first big pass, right? And she was going to do sort of like it was the first time she was seeing the manuscript, basically. And, she said, I think I want, because what they do is they go out and they do this Dodge, and then they go back, and then you're explaining the practice room, and they're walking up the stairs and taking off their dresses and, pulling the stuff out of their thieving pockets, that go all the way down to the bottom of their crinolines, all this stuff. And she says, I think I want to see the practice first and then the Dodge second. And I said, okay, I'll give it a try. And so I wrote that first scene, and as I did, I really did see it as a movie. I felt like I was watching it and I was just writing down what was happening because, the camera drops into this big practice room. So Elephant and Castle was originally a old coaching inn at the hub of 6 roads, which made it wonderful for thieves because they could come in and grab things and then run off. But the inn itself has 3 stories. And so on that upper story, that's where their practice room is. And there's light coming in the window. There's 2 windows there. There's a wooden floor. There's a bank of shelves and things like you would find in a department store. So they basically rebuilt part of a department store in there so they can practice. They have lock picks. They have a map on the wall. There's a desk where Amelia records all of their take for the day. They have tables so that they can take off their dress, lay it down, and the thieving pockets go all the way to the hem. And so they're pulling all the stuff out and dropping it onto trays. I mean, I could see it sort of was all there. And I just wrote down what was happening.
I love that. I love that so much.
And so that became the beginning.
Yeah. And it's a wonderful, like very, it grabs you. If you could wave a magic wand and cast this television series, do you have any ideas? Like, did you picture anybody? Like, do you picture people Do you picture actors? Do you picture anybody, maybe?
What's terrible is I don't know a lot of the young actors now.
Oh, I hear you.
Like I was flipping through people one day. I was like, I don't know who any of these people are, and they all look about 14. So, when I think about it, like I could definitely see, for example, a young Keira Knightley with in a dark brown because Kit has brown hair, but a young Keira Knightley being a very good Kit.
Oh, absolutely.
I think she would. Sarah is softer. And it was interesting when I was coming up with the 2 that Kit Mary says, so I'm writing the next book now, and in it, there's this conversation that happens, and Mary says, Kit, you and I think like thieves. We look at something and we think, okay, we want to get that. What do we have to clear away? What's going on around it? What do we have to clear away in order to get that thing? Whether it's a diamond necklace or whatever it is. Sarah reads incessantly. In fact, one of the scenes, Kit finds her sobbing brokenheartedly over Dick, the old curiosity ship over Dickens. I mean, and Sarah tends to think like a novelist. She puts things in stories. She's looking for connections. She's looking for congruences between this thing and that thing, or similarities between this person and that person. She's looking for those kinds of things. It's different. It's a different way of thinking. And but I think of Sarah. I think of someone like I don't know her name. This is terrible. I should know the actress's name, who played Prim in the Hunger Games.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but she feels
that age, Karen.
That feels close. I know. No, it's well. Not only do I not remember things, I don't know who any of the young actors are anymore. It's like I was rewatching West Wing recently, and Rob Lowe and Moira Kelly. They look so young. They're so young.
Babies.
But those are my people. Those are my people. It was 80s. And
no,
90s.
Nowadays, if people ask me that, I'm just sort of like, I can't even pretend to know.
Yeah.
Like if they're on Bridgerton, like maybe, but
right. Yeah, actually, one of the actors from Bridgerton would actually make a really nice James, because he's a good love interest. He's a little bit my book boyfriend too.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so that was my next question, was going to be about Kit and her romantic relationships, because it is there's so much about relationships among women, but he's kind of like the highlighted man. So what can you tell us?
Yeah. So James, he's always carried a torch for her. And right after Kit's mother died, Kit was like 15 and a half. And he suggested that they start running a badger scheme together. And for those of you who want to know how to run a badger scheme, this is how you do it. A young girl young woman will lure a man up into a room, get him half undressed, pull things out of his pockets, whatever. And then the husband comes in, storms in, and threatens to get, and the man runs off, leaving all of his stuff behind. Okay, so James and Kit ran that for about a year and a half, until Amelia Lyle, who runs the ring, says, okay, you're old enough to be a thief now. Come work with me. And so, James is really the reason that she was able to keep food on the table for herself and Sarah for about a year and a half. And then he gets caught thieving. So one of the things, the rivers run through all of my stories. The Thames runs in all of my stories.
Yes.
But one of the things I know, and one of the things he would do is, there was a lot of smuggling. Because people didn't want to pay the import taxes, the export taxes, all these things. And France in particular, they were naughty. They would come up the Thames and they would have double hulls, where they would have some wine barrels that they would declare at the custom house, which was on the north side of the Thames, kind of over by Wapping. And then they also had second, lower hidden ones with smaller barrels that they would offload in the middle of the night. And people like James and other people, they'd have their small boats, they dump them in, and they take them in into shore. And they had this set of tunnels that they could run things through. They had special stores and special houses that had trap doors. They could, take the stuff up. And this is kind of a fun fact, after the barrels made it to the shop where they were eventually going to be sold, for example, only then did they stamp it with the maker, because they don't want the police finding them and knowing who is smuggling this wine in. So the stamps were actually stores. Yeah. So James got caught doing that, and he's thrown in jail for a little while.
Oh,
so I know. Oh, James. He's an ex-con, but he manages to get out by doing something good. And now he's working at the custom house. One of his advantages is that his mother was French, and so he speaks French. And so he is actually valuable, because there's a lot of French captains who did not speak great English. So, yeah.
I know we're going to be opening up to questions from the audience soon,
Mhm.
but my last question is just I love Kit and I love her world and I would love to go back. Is there any way that we might, perhaps see a sequel?
Yes, there is a sequel. It's drafted already. So it's tentatively called A Thieving Season. And
Oh, great title.
there's a series of 6 paintings stolen, one from each ball during the London season at different families' homes. Because the really wealthy families had phenomenal collections, and a lot of and they would hold a ball, and then but each time there's a painting that disappears, and Kit, not to give too much away, she's kind of helping Styles out a little bit because she's one of the suspects, and so he kind of comes to her and he's like, are you involved in this? And she's like, no. He's like, really? Gordon Styles is an inspector of Scotland Yard that you meet in Artful Dodge, but he continues along with her.
I'm so
but she's
glad.
So she's coming back.
Yeah, I am so happy to hear that. That's fantastic. Hey guys, please ask us some questions. Karen's got all kinds of things to say about dodging and pickpocketing and
jewelry heists,
book boyfriends, and all kinds of great things. So, all right. Well, who who else would you cast? Who would you cast as Maggie? Like that's somebody who's more like our age, right?
Yeah, she's going to do older. Yeah, she's going to be older. So when she comes back, she's 40, 41, 42, somewhere in there. I don't know, she's dark-haired, quite beautiful, dramatic features, very capable, hard edge to her.
You would think I could be able to come up with someone, but
it's tricky. Like I've got her face in my head. Like I know what she kind of looks like to me, but I'm not sure who an actress is who would be playing her. Yeah.
I kind of liked Elizabeth Moss seems to have a sort of like gravitas and a certain she can be kind of tough. She's got a toughness to her. I don't know.
Yeah, Kate Winslet. Remember her in what was the TV show that she was in? It was Mayor of Eastham. That was it. Yes.
Yeah.
She's got an edge to her there, and put her in dark hair, and she could do that. That
Absolutely.
feels right. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, what did I not get to that you'd like to say about the book?
Oh,
I know I'm putting the spotlight back on you. So.
Yeah. I feel like I've kind of shared a lot, but the book really is about it. I often tend to feel as though the mystery plot, which ends up being a jewelry heist, because Maggie basically coerces Kit into doing this impossible jewelry heist, and she pulls it off in a way that is not going to that's not in line with what Maggie wants. But I often think of this, the plot line as being like this. And then all of the emotional stuff is like the close on it. Like the mystery is basically just there so that I get to talk about things like relationships and people's relationship to their own past, how they feel about it, whether they're trying to forget it, redo it, make amends, all those things, relationships among people, how they change over time. So these were just some of my concerns that were, sort of on my mind, and I could kind of work them around the jewelry heist plot. And I don't know, I feel like I have written enough about London that, I mean, you use the word cinematic. I think I do feel it's cinematic in the sense that I feel like I'm there when I'm writing it. I can see the sawhorses where they put out the coffee in the morning for the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of men in black suits who are walking into the city to work. And then when they're coming back out at night, and the macadam and the pavements that they're ripping up continually because they keep putting in new gas lines and new electrical lines and new water lines because London is changing so drastically. I think London at this point has something like 6 million people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and it's between it and some of the suburbs. I mean, it's monstrous. And and then you think about how the Thames is really kind of like this big divider, but it
Mm-hmm.
isn't, because the boats cross all the time and there's all these bridges. And even when Sarah crosses from Elephant and Castle, which is this seedy little part of London, she goes across the river to Mayfair, and she
Mm-hmm.
still finds crime there.
Of
It's like
course.
you take yourself, you take your world with you, and London may be vast, but it's very interconnected and intertwined. The presence of wealth on the north side is going to beg people from the south to come over and try and take it. So I think that there's a lot of stuff about London itself, the city, as well as the relationships, and then of course the fun heist, with the
Of
jewelry.
course. Well, we have a
So
question now from Beth Thomas. And did
okay.
you know when you started the book how it would end?
This is a great question. Do you know,
Isn't it a
I'm
great
not,
question?
well, okay, so I'm not even sure. I remember starting, I mean, I don't think I did actually. At the very beginning, when I am starting a book, usually it is fueled by that moment of surprise. Oh my God, there really were these women banding together to be a ring of thieves. And that surprise creates a certain amount of energy that keeps me going for the first 3 chapters. And I just kind of jump in, and there it is. Because the moment when they go and do their dodge, that kind of came very full blown to me too. So like I have the first couple chapters, and then I'm like, okay, now what? Now what happens next? And I knew I wanted to work in someone coming back from the penal colony, because I think that's a pretty neglected part of history. And these
Yes.
women, I mean, I read accounts of these women being buried alive, forced into prostitution. I mean, just completely devastating things that, some of which Maggie experienced. I mean, she comes back with a chip on her shoulder and an edge to her, but it is honest
Oh,
to
yeah.
land. I
Yeah.
mean, so I think honestly, I didn't know how the book would end. I did know I wanted to have a heist, but I didn't know kind of what it was going to be or how it was going to be until I started doing some research on rivers, on underground rivers in London, and then I figured that out. So no, when I started, I was all excited about my first 3 chapters, and then I had to pause and think, okay, what's going to happen next? So thank you for the question, Beth.
Well, I have another question. It actually
Mm-hmm.
has to do with the way both of us approach our subjects. And I know you mentioned how you're not writing about murder. You are writing about thieves and cons and all kinds of things like that. I did not do that, but I did have a friend who lost her son, who was murdered, who made me sort of reevaluate the way I look at how I do this on fiction. I went the other way. I write about women who've lost people and who have now solved cold cases, because that is how they work through their grief. That is how they work through their anguish. So talk me through your process. How did you sort of like, because it's great and it's amazing. Like it again, cinematic and exciting, thrilling, all this thievery, and you don't get bogged down by, like the really, really serious stuff. So tell me about that.
Yeah, I took murder as my topic for Down a Dark River and Under Veiled Moon, the 2
Hmm.
previous books. It's Scotland Yard. You need a big crime, right? Murder and death, and then yeah, I mean, kind of like you, I had a friend who had a son who died tragically, and in a car crash, and I just wasn't up for using death anymore.
Yeah.
And I was talking to Juliet that day when we were sitting at Left Coast Crime, and she says, and her eyes got really big. She has big blue eyes, big eyes,
She
and she's like, "You don't have to write murder. You can write crime." And I said, okay. And so that was kind of where I came up with the idea. Well, I want to write about thieves, and I want to write, I mean, there things do happen. I mean, we do have a couple bodies, but that's not the center of the book.
Yes.
I really wanted it to be a heist. novel as opposed to a, solve the murder thing. But so I took the murder kind of pretty much out of it and kind of tucked it over to the side. You put it central and then worked through it. So those are two different ways of doing it. Yeah,
absolutely. But I love that. And it's also, for me, it makes it more fun to read. It's because I do think like murder is not just a plot device. It's not just a catalyst to, get your characters to start something. I mean, this is something that I take with a lot of seriousness. So to read a story about, thievery is just really fun. I'm glad you're doing something different.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a bit of a departure, and yeah, it was a good switch. Yeah,
excellent.
So, Lily, do you have anything you want to ask?
Well, I was going to say, Susan, thank you for pointing that out, because that is something that really jumped out to me about this novel too. Is we do see a lot of murder and crime fiction, so it's refreshing and fun to get a heist novel. And the stakes, you still manage to make the stakes just as high, I feel like, but it does feel different. So thank you for bringing that up.
Sure. I think it's like so important to talk about, and it's so interesting. I'd love for you to do an article someday. Maybe someday.
Yeah.
Well, if we don't have any more questions, Beth, thank you so much. Susan and Karen, thank you so much for being part of this evening. This has been wonderful. Truly, An Artful Dodge is a book that we have all been super excited about. It's such a fun read, and it's everywhere that you can get your books on June 2nd, next Tuesday. So look out for that. Yeah. If you guys don't have anything else to say, I can announce our gift card winners.
Please.
So for our $25 gift card to Mystery to Me, we have Andrea Miller. Our $50 gift card is going to Wendy Asher. And our $75 gift card is going to Lisa Casper. So congratulations all. We will email you shortly after this, and you'll get an e-gift card, and there will be all sorts of instructions in there on how to use it. Again, Karen, congratulations. Susan, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
And thanks all for joining us today. We'll see you at the end of June for another event. Have a good night.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Lily. Bye.
Thanks, y'all.